Good evening to you. We're so thankful that you're here tonight. We're thankful for your presence and your encouragement, and we look forward to spending a few minutes in the Word of God together. Remember, we're walking through one of the video courses that's found within the Methodist app. I encourage you to check that out if you're able to. I did notice in the past week or two that all of these videos, at least for these three main courses that they have developed, all those videos are available in YouTube. So even if you don't get the app to work, you can find the videos and their teachings there in the YouTube system as well. So if you need help finding those, just let me know. If you need help with the app, let me know. We have several, close to 20, 21, I believe, maybe even a few more than that, that are in the groups we've formed within the app. The idea is that in addition to housing the teaching of the videos and then the teaching related to the videos, there's also a way to interact, kind of like how we think about social media. And so that's an opportunity this presents that maybe our traditional tools have not presented in times past. And so we're thankful they continue to develop these same core teachings that the Bible teaches, but also make them available in 21st century means. So this lesson is lesson number 3. It's what is the covenant Jesus offered. That's the name of the video. What we'll do tonight is just put the verses on the screen that are featured in the video, just so that we're reading from Scripture, and then we'll look quickly at the questions that come from the video before we then move on to the rest of our time in study this evening. So lesson 3 is about the covenant. So it begins with Matthew 26, the passage there where Jesus is instituting the Lord's Supper. So verse 26, as they were eating, Jesus took bread. After blessing it, broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." He took a cup. When he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink again of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." The one key word they point out is the word covenant, and they mention how it is connected to the blood of the covenant. And that's going to be the starting point moving forward. What does it mean that he's offering a covenant? What does he mean that it's bought with his blood? It's also worth noting, just while we're here, how verse 29 ends. He will drink it. He will drink it with his disciples. He will drink it new. So new ends up being a very important key word moving forward too. Where will he drink it? In my Father's kingdom. So John 13 is the next passage under consideration, and it answers a question as to what are the expectations of the covenant. If you're going to accept the terms of the covenant, what does he then expect of us? Well, to keep this commandment, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. Those who accept his covenant will live out his love. And then Luke 14, beginning of verse 25. Now great crowds accompanied him, and he turned and said to them, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father, mother, wife, children, and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple." The key word there is hate. What does that mean? We might summarize it by saying it means to love less. So if we do not love father, mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters, and even ourselves less than we love him, we cannot be his disciple. Well, how does that look? What does that look like? The very next verse begins to address that for us. It's verse 27. "Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple." We're willing to give our whole lives up in death. A spiritual death, a spiritual sense of this is that we're giving ourselves up by dying to sin, but also willing to give up our death, our life in death, physically, for the sake of being his disciple. It demands loving him most and thus giving him most of all. The next question is, well, where do we find more out about the covenant? If he offers a covenant, it comes through his blood. It demands all that we have. It demands that we love. Where do we find more about it? Well, there's only one place we can go to find more about that covenant, and that is found in the Scriptures alone. 2 Peter chapter 1 and verse 3. His divine power has granted to us all things that pertain to life and godliness through the knowledge of him who called us to his own glory and excellence. We have everything we need, and it's all found in the holy revealed Word of God. You find that again in 2 Timothy 3, verses 16 and 17. All Scripture is breathed out by God and is profitable. It yields this: teaching, reproof, correction, and training in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, equipped for every good work. If we're going to keep the terms of the covenant, we're going to find them in the Scriptures, and we're going to find the path to obeying them through the Scriptures. And the last text comes from Colossians chapter 3. It's answering a question that's important note to leave on, to end with, and that is, how does God see us? When we obey the covenant, when we find ourselves participating in the covenant He offers, how does God then see us? And Colossians 3 begins to answer that question. If then you have been raised with Christ, that's obeying the covenant, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on the things that are above, not on things that are on earth. For there's a change that's been made. You have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. How does God see you? If we're in His covenant, if we're following His covenant, He sees Christ when He sees us. Our life is hidden with Christ in God. Verse 4, when Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with Him in glory. Again, you see the same idea in verse 4, when Christ, who is your life. Who does God see? When He sees us, who are in His covenant, He sees Christ, His Son. So with those texts setting the stage and being the source of teaching for all that we're wanting to learn about this covenant, there are 7 questions that then follow. 7 short answer, quick questions. We'll just read over them quickly. Challenge you to think through them a little bit tonight, but then also challenge you to try to research these and come back to them if you are having success being in the app. But question number 1, what is the definition of covenant? What are some examples of modern day covenants? Have you ever been in any sort of covenant? If so, what was it? Do we understand what covenants mean? We might first think of contracts. Contracts may be a form of a covenant, maybe not exact in every respect, but it at least begins to start us down that path of thinking what a covenant is. Question 2, why do you think Jesus commanded that we should remember Him by eating bread and drinking wine or fruit of the vine? What does Jesus say the bread and wine represent? And what does this say about the covenant Jesus offers? I mean, He spells it out explicitly. This bread represents my body or my flesh. This juice represents my blood. Well, what does it represent? It means then, the third question is, what does this say about the covenant Jesus offers? He had to give His body and give His blood so that we might eat and drink those elements. So when we're eating and drinking, we're remembering the price He gave to then offer the covenant to us. Question 3, what kind of covenant is Jesus wanting to make with us? What does that require of us? What did it require of Jesus? It is a relational covenant, but it's a relationship covenant that lasts for eternity. So in order to make that available, He had to give of Himself completely, including His own life in death. Well, now what does He require of us? He requires all of ourselves. That's Luke 14, verse 27. We take up our own cross to follow Him. Question 4, in the preceding verses, 25 and 26 of Luke 14, why do you think Jesus tells His disciples they must hate others in order to be a follower of Him? What does He mean by this? Of course, we explained it means to love less. You can't love others more than, or love self more than we love Jesus. That means at some point, sooner probably, if certainly not later, there'll be times in which our allegiance to others or to self will be tempted, it will be tested to love them more than we love our Lord. And so He's saying from the beginning, in order to accept that covenant, we must love Him most of all in order to be His follower. Question 5, Jesus' covenant asks us to love God and others as He loved us. That's the John 13 passage. What is God's definition of love? And how does this compare to our world's definition? Now, in the John 13 passage, He's showing us by washing His disciples' feet. In the hours and days that would come, He's showing He would love us and love them by giving his own life. So it's sacrificial. It's in the person's best interest. It's action. And it's not dependent upon whether or not the other person reciprocates and loves us back. That's at least a starting point for the definition of God's love. You see that in Romans chapter 5 and verse 8. You see it fleshed out in a lot of different directions in 1 Corinthians 13, obviously beginning verse 4 through the first clause of verse number 8. But does that meet with the world's definition? Is that how the world defines love? Clearly, it does not. So much of the world's definitions of love depend on feelings and emotions. It depends on if love is returned first. That's described as love, but that's not truly love. God is love, and thus we go to him for the definition. Question 6, how does being in a covenant with God change the way he sees us? How should this change the way we live our lives? So he views us as he views his son. He's continuing to recreate us in the image of his son. Our lives are with Christ. And so when we recognize he has changed us completely, he views us differently, we must continue to view ourselves differently too. We're no longer performing. We're no longer trying to earn his approval. He now saves us, welcomes us to his covenant when we obey him. That changes us completely. And final question, in your own words, how would you explain the covenant Jesus offers? Now, I appreciate this question being at the end. See, what they've done is, after walking through these texts of Scripture, then they ask, what does the covenant of Jesus look like? What does it include? What would you describe it as? It's important to summarize and be able to speak things sometimes in our own words, but only after we've learned from God what they are. It's different asking this as the final question, question 7, as opposed to asking it, say, the first question or early on. So I think that's a helpful order to be able to address this and then to come to an idea of whether or not we've learned what he teaches about his covenant. There are 2 additional sections, remember? So if you're in the app especially, I would encourage you to break down those exercises, those passages they reference, and then ask specific questions about in detail. And then also there are 3 different essays that they call digging deeper essays. And I think the value of the exercises, but especially those 3 different essays, the value this week's provide is especially in pointing us toward the new covenant. See, God offers a lot of covenants in Scripture, but there's now only one covenant of record, the main covenant of his Son, Jesus Christ, which is, of course, explained in thorough detail in the book of Hebrews, for instance. But that's a specification we need to be comfortable with if we're going to study the Word of God with other people, especially in this modern religious age. And so those essays do a good job of introducing that new covenant idea and fleshing that out even deeper. So I would encourage you, if you're able to be able to access that. If you have questions, let me know. Love to assist you with doing that. Got a handful of folks who have begun that and are participating in the app, and so I know they would love to help you as well. As we move toward praying for laborers tonight, before we do that, I want us to read quickly Psalm number 67. A couple of weeks ago, we worded our prayer for the evening from the opening verses of that psalm, and then tonight we'll pray using the language of the latter verses of that psalm. So Psalm 67. May God be gracious to us and bless us and make his face to shine upon us, that your way may be known on earth, your saving power among all nations. Let the peoples praise you, O God. Let all the peoples praise you. Let the nations be glad and sing for joy, for you judge the peoples with equity. Guide the nations upon the earth. Let the peoples praise you, O God. Let all the peoples praise you. Our prayer will emphasize, beginning verse number 6. The earth has yielded its increase. God, our God, shall bless us. God shall bless us. Let all the ends of the earth fear him. So let's now pause as we've been doing on our Sunday nights, and let's pray. Let's pray especially for the Lord to send out laborers to the harvest. Father, we thank you. We thank you for the reminders we have this time of year and in the coming weeks and months that the earth yields its increase and continues to bear fruit. We thank you for the dependability of conditions in this world that allow us to enjoy the fruit of the harvest. We thank you for revealing your abundant blessings upon us as your church, as your people. And for these blessings we beg, we thank you for them. We above all pray that as seeds spread crops and spread the fruit of produce, that so too the gospel will spread to the ends of the earth, to honest and willing hearts. And we pray that beginning with us in this place, and this night and this time, that the ends of the earth might fear you. We thank you for the promise of the harvest. Please keep humbling us as your laborers in the harvest. Please send laborers into the harvest tonight. Give us courage, wisdom, patience, and boldness to find them, to love them, to teach them. And it's all these things that we ask. In Jesus' name, amen. Rick mentioned this Wednesday night, and of course we are thankful to the Lord for Matt's success on Tuesday night, but especially the good that Matt can do for the Lord in this capacity and other capacities as he has been given the support of the people to go represent parts of our county and area in Montgomery. I got to thinking after we saw some of the election results on Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, driving around town Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and looking at the number of signs that were still out. And I got to doing just some rough calculations, and I thought, we had 55-60% of that district number 13 that voted for Matt, and then the percentages fell off after that. I don't see a breakdown of 55 to 60% of the signs, say, being Matt's, and then the lower percentages after that. It seems pretty balanced between all the 5 candidates, or maybe at least 3 out of the 5 or something like that. And then there was similar kind of results when it comes to superintendent. The winning candidate won 55% of the votes. And yet you see a good balance of all the candidates. It certainly seems at some point you've got people who are saying, sure, if you know me, yeah, you can put your sign in my yard. But that doesn't mean I'm voting for you. Right? You've got a lot of yards or a lot of properties where there are signs, but those signs don't necessarily equal a vote. Once the votes were tabulated, they represent a much different cross-section than the signs do. So what's the point? When it comes to us and our faithfulness to God, what is most significant? Are our hearts and our homes being pure and obedient to God? Is that what's most important? Or is it more important to have a sign in our yard that says, say, quote, Christ? This is the house that belongs to Christ, or is it truly on the inside a house that belongs to Christ and supports the will of Christ? See, we need the reminder, and this text does a strong job of that righteousness before God is far more than how strongly we profess Him to others and before others. Righteousness and faithfulness to God demands us professing Him to others and before others, but it's much more than how that is viewed outwardly. Jesus is going to address that here in Luke chapter 11. I think I must have typed chapter 13 in the bulletin, so if you noticed that, I apologize. I just got Acts 13 from this morning and Luke 11 confused, so don't let that confuse you. We're in Luke 11 tonight, beginning at verse 37. While Jesus was speaking, a Pharisee asked him to dine with him. He's going about teaching, and a Pharisee, whom he often ruffles their feathers, he still invited Jesus in to eat with him. So he went and reclined at table. It's important noting here that Jesus is not a hypocrite when it comes to accepting these invitations. Although the Pharisees are trying to trap him, he often goes and still is able to eat with them. So verse 38, the Pharisee was astonished to see that he did not first wash before dinner. So the Lord said to him, now you Pharisees cleanse the outside of the cup and of the dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness. You fools. Did not he who made the outside make the inside also? But give as alms those things that are within, and behold, everything is clean for you. So the admonition from the Lord is, you make your whole self obedient to Christ and to God more directly. You make your whole self obedient to God instead of compartmentalizing outward and inward. This text reminds us on the front end here that in order to see Jesus, the Jews first had to change how they viewed their obedience to God. See, they thought obedience was just something outward, that if we can get the right outward traditions and the right outward laws, then that will be enough. We're not really as concerned with what's happening on the inside, and Jesus is having to shake them up and turn everything upside down for them. We need the constant prodding from Scripture. Is it possible we could struggle with the same dynamic? We've made it a fun practice a little more often the past couple of years. We enjoy going to Waffle House as a family. It's a little cheaper than most places. And we went Wednesday. We'd kind of had just a long day at home, and I don't know if any of us had eaten all that great, so Wednesday for a late lunch, I said, all right, get some clothes on. I'm tired of this. Let's go eat at Waffle House. And we went to Waffle House, and we're sitting there, and Hazel says she's starting to feel a little better. And then she says, Daddy, look. And they were cleaning the floor in the kitchen part. We'd seen it happen before, and it's just kind of a neat thing to do. They take their buckets of water, maybe they've got Clorox or other soapy materials in it, and they throw it just all over the floor. They empty the bucket all over the floor back there in the kitchen area while they're cooking, while they're walking around on it. I suppose they take a mop, maybe mop some specific parts of the floor, and then take squeegee. They just keep moving that water toward the drains, and it's built to where it'll drain down them. But they've got it partitioned off. You don't notice it unless you're looking for it, but they've got it partitioned off to where the water doesn't roll out into the dining area. I assume they do that a couple of times a day, which is kind of neat to watch. It's neat. I suppose it's a lot easier to watch other people clean than it is for us to clean, isn't it? That seems to be the case with the Pharisees, right? It's a whole lot easier to watch other people try to keep the Word of God than it is for me to be consistent with how I keep it. It's a lot easier to observe than it is to participate in. We've developed this saying over the past couple of months when it comes to cleaning. Since it's fun to be clean, it's also fun to clean. But sometimes we have a hard time believing it, and the girls do too. It's not always fun to clean, but it's fun to be clean, so we decide to clean. Well, the Pharisees loved to help other people be clean, but they didn't always love to be consistent, or at least they loved to tell other people about being clean. They didn't love being consistent with those teachings. So this man was confused. He thought it was important to be physically clean, but he did not view the cleanliness of his soul with the same urgency. And so in Jesus' illustration about the cup, he points out their hypocrisy by telling them, you know, you only worry about the outside of the cup. God made both, remember? He made your outside and your insides. Which is more dangerous to your health, the outside or the inside? If you were given the choice, do you want a cup that's only dirty on the outside or a cup that's only dirty on the inside? Which would you choose? See, the poison, the mold, the bacteria could hurt you from the inside. But from the outside, it's probably generally harmless. So Jesus is really showing them your hypocrisy is catching up with you because you're inwardly dirty, but outwardly you think you're clean. The man is asking with urgency, how could you not wash your hands? But Jesus wants us to ask and him to be pricked in heart because he's thinking, how could you not wash your heart? How could you not come before the law and before God daily like you do and still not see your heart is what needs to change? So we'll quickly go through the rest of these woe statements. It continues all the way through. And we'll quickly do this. I know we're kind of pressed for time now, but the big probably deciding factor in all this is that when we read all of these statements, if the first thing we do is think about someone else or think about, well, this verse sounds like so-and-so or that verse sounds like these people and those people, we've already begun the step in the wrong direction. The best practice we need to do is when we read these is to say, am I doing this or not? Is this about me or is it not? So yes or no questions. Yes is not great. No is preferred, but it gives us something to assess ourselves by and to work on with the Lord's help. So question number 1, based on what we've already read, do I get more anxious over external traditions than internal purity? See, washing hands and all this that they were trying to enforce was more or less a tradition, not required, and else Jesus would have done it if it was required. And so they got worked up. And yet Jesus says, inwardly you're not pure. And this is especially helpful when it comes to us thinking about soul winning and evangelism on Sunday nights. What do I have in mind when I pray for lost souls to be saved? Do I primarily mean that I want people to keep some of the traditions I elevate? Or do I mean I want them to be pure before God? Do I mean that I want them to see them come to obey the full truth of God? That's what Jesus is saying about ourselves. There can be some traditions we developed over time that he may not speak about. We need to value ourselves inwardly more than those traditions. Question number 2 comes from verse 42. Woe to you Pharisees, you tithe mint and rue and every herb and neglect justice and the love of God. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. Yes, obedience will challenge us. You can't choose one or the other. So he's asking, do I elevate my passion for outward obedience, the tithing of the smallest little piece of herb? Do I make that more valuable than my compassion for those in the margins, justice and love? Here he's emphatic. You got to do both. Keep tithing as the law says, but also don't ignore your fellow man, your brother or your neighbor because of it. And it's in Matthew 23, similar account, where Jesus actually says love and justice are weightier matters. He expects us to do them all. But there are those that are more closer to God's heart, and thus that we must not neglect them. So, number 3, do I tend to my reputation of godliness more than my actual godliness? Woe to you Pharisees, verse 43, you love the best seat in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplaces. I love to be seen in the right seats. I love to be seen at the religious events. But pursuing true godliness is lower on the list than my reputation. Proves they love themselves most. Verse 44, woe to you, for you are like unmarked graves. People walk over them without knowing it. Numbers 19 contains several different laws that deal with cleanliness. Meaning if you touch dead bodies or touch graves in the wrong way, you can become unclean. So why did they build up these fanciful graves that cover them in every inch? Because they didn't want to become unclean. So now what he's saying is, because you're dead on the inside, you're like an unmarked grave. The people that come near you, the people that come stand over you, the people that follow you, they are, guess what, unclean. The more they follow you, the closer they get to death. So you view yourself as an enforcer of the law, and yet, where are you leading people? You're leading them closer to death, farther from the Lord. So, do you have people fooled? Do they think that you're the source of life, but yet you've rendered them unclean, and you're leading them closer to death? All right, verse 45 takes a shift in the text. I don't know what this lawyer was thinking. Typically, lawyers are supposed to only answer questions, make statements that they know the answers to. Well, this lawyer speaks up, maybe taking up for his Pharisee friends. Teacher, in saying these things, you insult us also. Well, okay, that makes sense because I've got some things against you too, Jesus says. Lawyers and Pharisees were often connected. The Pharisees were the enforcers of the law. They went about more publicly, but they needed the guidance. They needed the interpretation skills of the lawyers or the scribes, the teachers. And so they speak up and they say, hold up, Jesus, you're kind of stepping on our toes too. We love the law. You wouldn't dare offend us, would you? Well, look at verse 46. Woe to you lawyers also, you load people with burdens hard to bear, and you yourselves do not touch the burdens with one of your fingers. He's not highlighting how they don't obey anything. He's highlighting how they recognize these commands can be hard and difficult and costly. And they'll teach them. And they'll push them off on other people because, hey, this is in the text. Or, hey, this is a tradition. And they do nothing to help them in their obedience. What about us? Are we invested in teaching other people what the Bible says? But then as soon as we do that, we back away and refuse to really help them. We don't invest in them with time and with patience. to help them obey it? It's hard to come to obey Christ. It challenges us. It takes a lot. It also takes a lot to continue in that obedience. So Jesus says, you don't really love people. You don't really love the law since you're not willing to help people keep obeying it after you've taught it. Verse number 47, woe to you, for you build the tombs of the prophets whom your fathers killed. You are witnesses. You consent to the deeds of your fathers, for they killed them, and you build their tombs. See, they thought they were doing a good thing by building their tombs. Look at who we're honoring, the prophets of old. Jesus says, you're actually participating in the death your fathers caused by building these tombs. So verse 51, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, I think it's just random chance, but it happens to be A to Z, who perished between the altar and the sanctuary, yes, I tell you, it will be required of this generation. The first martyr for his faithfulness to God, to one of the last chronologically before John the Baptist and Jesus, you're paying for their blood now. It's going to be required of your generation. So do I ignore the clear message of God in order to protect my history or my heritage or my family? It could be possible that we see that which is necessary to obey, and yet we would rather preserve some sense of self, some sense of history and heritage. They were doing that, and thus they missed Jesus and they mistreated other people. Final one, verse 52. Woe to you, lawyers, for you have taken away the key of knowledge. You did not enter yourselves, and you hindered those who were entering. Because you did not fully obey it. Because you did not commit to living it out. Because you were only concerned with the outward instead of the inward. Your full lifestyle is not allowing people to enjoy the full depths of the law and of the Scriptures. So we need the question, does the way that I live, does that keep others from seeing the full truth that I want them to know and that I want them to obey? Yes is again, we're not great, good. No is good. Can we say we're honestly doing our best in all these areas? If we fall short in a few of them, we need to write that down and begin with the one or two that we struggle with the most. 7 is a lot, obviously. It adds up. It's a lot of weight to bear. But when our hearts will decide to be right with the Lord and we'll seek Him for His guidance but also His forgiveness, we'll find that truth and we'll find the strength to obey it. We need to remember this in terms of our evangelistic efforts and thinking about soul winning, that evangelism is neither telling people what they want to hear, nor is it telling them how wrong they are. We can't convert a single soul either way. And this text reminds us that our job is to open the Scriptures and let them see truth and let them decide if they will obey it or not, and pray with them and pray for them and show them the positive motivations for following, to live a life consistent with what we teach them. But they had the market cornered in terms of telling people how wrong they were. And yet Jesus here rebukes them, and God rebukes them, and they end up rejecting Jesus even to the point of crucifying Him. Jesus came, remember Luke chapter 4, when you read from Isaiah, to proclaim liberty to the captives, freedom to the captives, and to set at liberty those who were oppressed, to give liberty and freedom. That's why He came. He didn't come to restrict or to bind or to blind. He came to set free. So Galatians 5, which interestingly precedes that list of works of the flesh that the Jews did a good job of living out. It precedes the fruit of the Spirit, which we would do well to live out. We would do well to follow God so that He produces those things in our lives. That's the alternative He expects of us. You were called to freedom, brothers. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. See, they were taking the things of God, the laws of God, and still living out of the flesh, using those laws as their means of control. Instead, we humbly serve God so that we humbly serve and love one another. 1 Peter 2, verse 16. Live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God, similar to what those Jews were doing. They were covering up their terrible, evil insides, all for the sake of proclaiming the goodness of God, they thought. So closing question. This is a good one to answer yes to. Do I know and do I show that the gospel of Jesus Christ frees through His grace? Do I know and show the gospel frees? It's a freeing gospel. It frees us from the constraints of the law. It frees us from the dangers of sin. We cannot believe it's our role